interested in where they were positioned. And what did he find? That on a scale of miles, look at that chart, there to there is 4 miles. 3 of these dolphins were positioned in that configuration. Need I ask you what that angle was? Who can tell me what that angle was?
72 degrees.
Very good. That's very good. You're doing all right so far. It was 36 degrees. So suddenly we're learning that not only are they putting art down in the fields, they're putting art down on the map. They are aware at a scale of miles what proportions they're using. This was a neat little Mercury symbol of 92. 92 and 93 were basically very quiet years, and this, many people say, is a result of the massive Doug and Dave hoax scam, which was very widely pushed at the end of 91 and caused a great deal of damage. But this arrived at the end of 93 and was a real sign that things were opening up again. It was called the Bythorn Mandala. And it was, now here's the interesting thing. What we have in it is a 5-pointed star, a pentagram. The pentagram which we had discovered was implicit in many of the formations, which could be read when we had photographed and measured them, but which had never before appeared. And so in a way, we regarded this as some kind of confirmation from teacher that we were moving in the right direction. I guess this remains, I suppose this is my favourite crop circle. That over there is weed, incidentally. But the other thing remarkable about it is that everything here was swept clockwise, so that every one of these lines was going clockwise. And the other interesting thing is, if you look carefully at these petals, they're all defined by a path. There are some angles you can see it, and some you can't. That one, for example, you can see there's a path around the petal. That's a good one. You can see that very clearly. And that was a 3-foot-4 wide path. Again, always clockwise, but look at it around the petal. Now, it took us years to understand this, and this was when we were measuring it. This was the farmer. This was me in my younger days. And this is John Martineau, who I do a lot of work with. This is the farmer's wife who can materialize as a dog. Now, this guy was absolutely enchanted. I mean, this was the archetypal, delightful farmer. He walked in, found this in his field and thought, hey, this is a blessing. This is the most wonderful gift. And he got a soup tin and he nailed it to the top beam of his gate with a little notice saying £1 for entrance, and he sent all the money to the fund to repair the church spire. And I had a long correspondence with him, and it was some weeks before I realized that he couldn't write, that his wife was reading him, obviously when she'd rematerialized into earthling form, she was reading my letters and he was then dictating to her the response. It was terribly touching. And every time anybody visited the field, I mean, it wasn't terribly visited, this. Every time anybody went to visit it, he would appear. He was so delighted and proud. He just stopped doing what he was doing, slaughtering sheep or castrating bulls or whatever it is. he would stop and would come immediately to sit and talk. And on this occasion, we were measuring. That's the centre pole, look, with the tape on it. We did the survey. And we said, we're going to sit in the field, come and sit in the field. He said, what? We said, come and sit down. He said, sit in the field? And we said, yes, sit down in the field. He had never heard, in his life as a farmer, he had never sat in a field. So I'm very proud of this photograph. We got him to sprawl out with his dog and chat for a bit. He'd never done it before. Isn't that extraordinary? I just found that astonishing. And here's the survey. Now, we couldn't work out what was happening. I mean, in recent years, in the last year or so, I've developed a hypothesis that the crop circles are, in fact, labyrinths for us. They're gifts for us, and that in tracing a certain route around them, you can touch a certain spiritual depth. And what I find is that the manufacture of the circle seems to have two prime objectives. Number one, a respect for life. It never damages the crop. Number two, a hospitality for humans. They want us to go in. Now, quite honestly, 1 and 2 are in a way mutually exclusive, because when we go in, we kill the crop. When we walk in, the crop dies, if you see what I mean. But in principle, they want us to go in, and in principle they have respect for the crop. And what we've seen in later years is that they always leave gateways for entry. You never have to trample your way in. Now, what was discovered was that the labyrinthine nature of this was that if you entered here, say, going always clockwise, you go round to, obviously that's a heart. It's an elongated heart, right? So having described that heart, you then do 2 there, you go down, do 2 there, you go along, 2 there, along, 2 there, along, and you're back. And if you did that, you were always walking with the flow of the crop. Now, hey, by the time we discovered it, the crop had been harvested 4 years ago, and that's, the hindsight is the most accurate of sciences, and one of the problems we get is that looking at these things, you learn a bunch more when it's too late, unfortunately. Now, we're into 94, and can you see that this is a scorpion? It's clearly meant to be a scorpion. There's the sting in the tail. But the thorax is made up of our old friend the quintuplet. And the other thing which has arisen is this feature, which was very much to the fore in 94, was increasing circles. This was known by many as the giant scorpion, but we don't think it's a scorpion. We think it's a dragonfly for all kinds of reasons. But the beautiful, beautiful piece of design. I mean, just look at that. Chest and eyes and shoulders. I mean, it's astonishing. This was about 550 feet long. Now, this is one of the classic thought bubbles. There were several of these growing up in size, but always growing uphill. Thought bubbles always appeared on hillsides with a small bubble at the low end and the big bubble at the top. Now here again, I mean, one of the problems with aerial photography is it flattens ground, so you can't read it as well as you might. But what you have here is 2 sets of thought bubbles, both of them going uphill as it happens. And here you can see just how steep some of the hills were. Now, another thing in 94, I put this on especially because this hill behind it is terribly important. This is Oliver's Castle, which we're going to be dealing with in some detail later on. So remember that. That's another bit of homework. There's a shot from the top, nested crescents at Oliver's Castle. This was an infinity symbol, and again, this is another shot which shows just how convivial these centres become. Clearly, every single circle we look at is based on rotational dynamic in the way the crop itself is swirled in the bed of the circle. But this was the first time the rotating motion had been made manifest, had been made graphic. I mean, nobody can look at that and believe that it's anything but rotating. That is a symbol of rotation. And that also was a similar graphic. I mean, these kind of go faster stripes around them are making us know that is supposed to be swirling. Patricia will be dealing with this in some detail. This is one of the early planetary galaxy symbols, and just look at the detail lay. When you were in there, it was like water surging past rocks. The way the crop simply flowed around the events within it. This is another similar one, but obviously without the swirl stripes here. And again, look at the beautiful lay of it. Now, this was called the bee, but there was an entomologist who said that's not a bee, that is a dragonfly larva. So there are all kinds of characteristics of dragonflies which led us to believe that we were being told about dragonflies. This is the classic geometry that you do at school, where you draw a circle, and then you put the compass point in, and you draw like that, and then you walk around the perimeter. You know that thing. So many people felt it was just very crude and simple geometry, but the geometry was very subtly altered to leave gaps at all the points there, so that, I mean, if you draw that thing, you find that everything meets at a point. And of course, had they done that, we wouldn't have been able to get in without bashing our way through there. And so whenever there was a space, there was a gap left for us to get in. I found that one, I'm proud to say. This is Avebury Stone Circle, and there are some of the stones. Now, they look pretty tiny here, but let me tell you that is the village. There are houses, right? That's the village. And there's one of the best vegetarian restaurants in the world just over there. And this thing arrived, the web, which was an astonishment. And this is a shot from virtually overhead. Once again, you could see the size of the people. And there is a shot from within showing the earthworks of the stone circle right next to it. And this was called the 13 Moons, and was interpreted either as an extension of the planetary symbol or as an insect curled up in hibernation. But 13 is very much a number of transformation. 95 now. And this 95 was an extraordinary year. We get the impression that we are really on some kind of journey, which gets more and more exciting as the time goes by. This huge thing arrived by a main road once again. They seem to like main roads because they get seen.
It was on the side of a highway. And it's just amazing when you see something like this, why there are no cars stopped to go inside of it. But there weren't. People were driving by like it was television. And sometimes they're placed that way and they just kind of sing off the hill at you. This was a circle called Roundway because it was in a field called Roundway.
God.
And the design seems appropriate. It was a beauty.
This is 95.
95. These
We're
are all
completely in 95.
95. This was in an area called the Punch Bowl, and you look down, and this field is often visited to the great dismay of the farmer,
People.
who's getting angrier and angrier every year about this.
It was Patricia was doing some research and she was reading the comments of people. What was his name?
Pascal?
No.
Peveril. Bruce.
Peveril Bruce. Somebody said, wrote saying, we found an amazing formation in the Punch Bowl this year, and we went to Farmer Bruce. And he was really angry and said, well, we could just go in this year, but never again. Please don't disturb him again. That was 89, right? 1990, there's another report saying, Farmer Bruce has an astonishing formation. We went to see him. He was really angry and said he would never let us in ever again. Right.
But just this once, he let us, and only us, none of our friends, go in and measure.
91. Yeah.
Peveril Bruce is furious. He absolutely says we cannot go in.
Ever again. And this goes on year by year by year. If you look at the reports.
So finally, last year, I was really looking forward, last summer, 96, to what he would get. And a researcher told me, don't bother, because he hasn't even planted this summer.
He'd been driven so crazy, he left his field alone. This, again, just for scale, those are people in the middle. This was in Sussex.
There's an interesting story about this, how two brothers, unknown to each other, both wished for a crop circle in this particular field. Each went in and met each other and told each other this story without the other one knowing. They both said, well, I wish for it. You wish for it. I wish for it.
It's mine. No, it's mine.
And it's reminiscent of the Twilight Zone tunnel, isn't it? Well, 8-point geometry and
a Nautilus. Yeah. Now, we talked about quintuplets, and you are now PhDs in quintuplets. You guys know as much as there is to know about the quintuplet. And we did a lecture in Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. And they all decided that they were very excited. They were going to wish for a formation. What would they like? And they had a discussion, and they said, we're going to get a quintuplet next year. And suddenly there was this quintuplet of quintuplets, right? Which
we actually drew a quintuplet on the board because that's what the audience wanted.
And everybody concentrated on it. So this arrived. They were kind of pleased, I suppose. And that was the interior of this quintuplet of quintuplets. Very strong lay.
The center was so fluffy.
The galaxies.
This was the first year we really started to see kind of this thing of galaxies and maybe a thin orbit line around a central planet.
Where you can see the orbit line where the sun catches it and shines through. Now, if you take the labyrinth idea, it would have been possible to make this formation out of many separate circles, and to walk around it you would have had to break the wall between the circles. But the orbit line creates a series of gateways from one circle to the next, so you could get through without breaking the cross.
So those weren't man-made, they were made by these designers. They're only probably about 6 inches wide in this case.
Those center orbit lines, they're very thin.
Maybe a foot. This was, someone counted these, I think it was just about 200 separate circles.
Now, this was very important because everything we've seen up to now has drawn with flattened corn. It's as though the pen is the stylus which lays the corn flat. But what's happening here is that the drawing line is standing corn. And there you can see it's about 8 or 9 inches, an 8 or 9 inch wide wall of corn. And that is Karen Douglas, the world's leading field researcher.
She goes into more fields every year than about anyone and takes meticulous notes about the lay and the construction. She's very important.
She's a great resource, Karen.
This is a circle that when you stood in the center of it, you could see another white horse. As Michael told you, I think there's 7 in the area. It was so beautiful. We found this. We didn't know it existed, and we found it. We were drawn into it. We had no idea what we were walking into.
It was very difficult to decipher because it's so big. And you see, you can imagine this is a pole shot where you put the camera on a high pole and take it. But you can imagine that on the ground, this is very difficult to decipher, and made more difficult by the tram lines. You can't work out initially whether they're part of the geometry. So it was not easy to unpick this formation.
But we ended up pacing it off. I train horses, so I'm used to a very solid pace when I set fences, and I have a 3-foot stride. So we started with a center circle, and Michael sat with a notebook, and we paced the whole thing off, and actually ended up drawing it up in about an hour.
At dusk. And we were so delighted. We thought, we found this circle, nobody's seen this. And we went immediately to the Barge, which is the Crop Circle pub, and there was a diagram on the wall. So we'd been beaten to it. But the thing was that we had the dimensions. No one else had the dimensions, so we were proud of that. And hey, for an hour it was ours, right?
Yeah, this came early in the season. It was a 4-pointed spinning star, a rotating planet with 4 arms. It landed around Sussex, that area. Very beautiful. Here's the 5, which I love where this landed. It was landed in Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber's estate. And of course, like every other person in England, just about, he thinks they're hoaxes. He was away at the time and in Barbados on vacation, and his estate or farmland there has security guards around it.
Millions of pounds worth of security guards.
High stone walls and things like that.
Electronics, the whole shooting match. You know.
So they felt it necessary to call him and tell him he had received the gift of a crop circle, his security guards. And he got very upset. He said, well, why did you let them in? How did they get in? And they said, "Excuse us, sir, but we don't believe anyone got in." And he said, "What are you telling me?" And supposedly he got so furious he started to cry. And to this day, it could be possible he doesn't even know about this gorgeous gift. Only a few researchers got in to take close detail shots. We have some beautiful ones. I mean, this lei was so beautiful and fluffy.
I didn't put it in.
That's okay. But another thing is, Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote Jesus Christ Superstar and Starlight Express. So, do you want to tell the story?
You tell the story.
Okay, this is after that 4 and the 5 this season, I thought to myself, God, I wonder if we'll get a 6-pointed star,
Swirling
rotating star. And sure enough, it arrived at the end of the season. And it's an interesting story. Michael and I were lost on a road in the middle of nowhere. And I saw a shadow on the hill, and I said, stop, stop. And saw this. And of course, they're harvesting right here. So we ran up to it and got the only shots of the inside. It was so beautiful. Go back. So we were standing in it, and I climbed on top of the tractor to try to get a higher shot because I didn't know if Nariel existed at that point because we hadn't heard of this. The farmer started to come up, and I said, have you seen what you have? And he said, bloody nuisance it is. And I said, well, have you been inside? No, the pub kids do them on the way home from the pub. Oh. And I said, but please, have you gone in? No, I don't need to. So that was it. He never saw it. His harvester went through it, and we were able to get a few shots.
So elegant. And I mean, that little shadow there is this because there was a little standing tuft of about 10 stalks. It was just the most immaculate.
There was a nest
formation.
of wheat around it, whirled.
Beautiful. I mean, just look at that floor lay. There's a swirl in the middle around the standing stalk, and then it explodes outwards, and then there's that ring there, and then again it curves outwards. And finally, there's this very narrow 5 or 6 inch wide ring. It was absolutely immaculate, you know. And I feel, I'm certain that anybody who looks at these is a goner, you know. The only way these farmers can continue with their ignorance is by refusing to go in.
It's true. Once they go in and they really look, they're changed. But it's just getting them there. Sometimes it's too bright for them. They just...
Now, in all of these crescent things, I have to tell you that there's nothing there but circles. I mean, you're so drawn away by the moons and the crescents, you forget that each of those crescents is made by 2 circles. So it's a very clever and knowing piece of geometry and design there. This was a beautiful formation.
This was very hidden away. You had to...
Can you give me a bit of focus, Vic? Are you there?
You had to be taken to it. You weren't ever going to find this one. This is the one
Good.
We were on our way home from when we got lost and found the other one. And there's something about it that's very kind of feminine in shape and kind of removed.
It felt so good, this one. I mean, it was just great. And there, you see, this is
There's
very...
Karen doing her research.
The other thing that is interesting is that the tram line on which you entered goes right to the centre. It's almost like an invitation. Please come in. And look at the tree line. The way the tree line and the tram line and the formation are absolutely lined up. One of the things we're noticing is the fact that their knowledge of the local landscape is breathtaking. And if you look at this, that was the entry tram line. and there is the break in the trees and an ancient road there. So that there are games being played on many different scales here. It's not only the design of the formation, it's also its relationship to the field.